Hello, welcome to the Analyst Inside Cricket with me, Simon Hughes, recapping the first T20 international between India and England in Calcutta. And I'm joined tonight by a special guest from India, Deep Dasgupta, the former Indian opening bat and keeper, and also current commentator. Deep, great to have you on. Thank you very much for joining us today to give us your thoughts about the first T20. I suppose the simplest thing to say here is that the Bazball era for white ball cricket has started with a bit of a whimper if you're an England fan. 7 wicket defeat, 43 balls remaining in the match, which is England's
Hmm.
heaviest T20 international defeat. And it was their 200th game today as well. How did you see it?
Uh, well, I've couple of things. First of all, thank you for having me over. Secondly, Simon, I thought it was a team which showed a lot of inexperience, especially playing in the subcontinent, especially playing in India. I thought, when you're playing in India, you've got to know how to play spin a lot better as compared to some of the other venues. And that was quite evident if you look at that batting order and how they played the spin. And yeah, so I think predominantly I won't be too harsh, because it was first outing for a lot of the players there, apart from let's say Jofra and obviously Josh Butler. I don't see too many of them having played too many games in India, so it was a bit of a tough initiation.
That's an understatement. I mean,
Yeah.
Butler just showed everybody else how to do it, and I suppose it was a difference in class in a way between him and all the other batters. I mean, it was ever thus. One of my first trips to an Indian Test match was in your
Yeah.
hometown, Calcutta, the very place we've just been, Eden Gardens, 1993 England-India Test match, and it was funny,
Yeah.
but the England team picked four seamers, four quick bowlers, and the Indian team picked three spinners. You might
Yeah.
remember the match, although you were probably very young at the time. And
Yeah.
obviously, India won comfortably. And today, it was bizarre, really. England playing four very fast bowlers, or pretty fast
Mhm.
bowlers. Yeah,
Yeah.
really, not only playing one specialist fast bowler, in fact. And the difference was very telling in the scorecard.
But Simon, I tell you very honestly speaking, we were quite surprised to see that Indian playing 11 because at Eden Gardens in T20 cricket, last few years, I say post 2015-16, the nature of the pitch has changed drastically. It used to be a low, spin friendly surface, but off late, it hasn't been that great a venue for the spinners. Even though, if you look at KKR, their home ground, home ground this, but they have very different kind of spinners. They generally have someone like a Sunil Narayan and Varun Chakravarthy, who really don't need the surface that much. But it hasn't been a happy hunting ground for spinners. So we were a little surprised to see that Indian playing 11 with three spinners. You can always argue that it's not just the surface, but also the opposition. And when you look at the opposition and England's struggle against spin in this format, especially, it's quite, I mean, it's well documented. If you look at the strike rate, if you look at the averages of spin for these batters, there is a stark difference. So I think that was strategically a, a really good move from the Indians, even though the surface did not demand three spinners, but they still went for it. And it was quite evident in the first over of Akshar, to be fair. I mean, like I said, Varun is a different kind of a bowler. He does not really need the surface, but Akshar, and even when Ravi Bishnoi came into bowl, the first four deliveries to Jacob Bethel was half trackers outside off stump. India had already lost 4 wickets for not much, so kind of got away with it. But if you think about it, I thought from the team selection point of view, I wouldn't be too harsh on the England side. I think that's England's strength. The surface also kind of demanded that kind of a combination, but I thought India really did well to not go with the numbers and the surface and go more with the opposition and what would hurt the opposition more.
And it was backed up by the stats actually. Spin 67 runs England from 72 balls with 5 wickets
Yeah,
lost, so averaging 13 against pace or
yeah,
seam 48 runs from 62 balls, only 3 wickets lost, and an average of 16. So quite a stark difference between spin, England playing spin and playing pace. Well, it was ever thus. It was always the same. Varun
Yeah.
Chakravarthy is an interesting bowler. He reminds me a little bit of the way Anil Kumble bowled, in that he doesn't really
Mhm.
turn the ball much, but he bowls
Yeah.
that bit of a leg spinner and then a sort of googly or a top spinner. You could almost.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if you can almost play him as a not a seamer, because in fact, Anil Kumble started as a seam bowler, didn't
Yes.
he? And then he turned to
Yes.
spin. He was a quick spinner. You don't have much
Mm.
time to playing the
Yeah.
cross batted shots, the pull shots, the cuts quite hard, isn't it? Is it a question of trying to hit a bowler like that down the ground more?
A couple of things. I think Varun, because he's played so much of cricket here at this venue on this surface, which we've just spoke about not being spin friendly, he knows how to bowl on this surface. See, he's some guy who bowls in his early 90s, maybe mid 90s, he bowls kilometers. And then what he also does is he bowls at back of length. So it's very difficult to step out against him because of the pace and the trajectory. Secondly, what he also does is he's got a really different kind of a grip. His grip is more like uh, you know how to bowl a carom ball, right? It's like that. It's kind of an off spinner's grip, but with the leg spin, he actually uses the middle finger. Generally, a traditional orthodox leg spinner would be using his ring finger, but he uses his middle finger, what we call the carom ball. So same way he bowls the googly. So he's a little different. He's not the usual leg spinner mold. So that is one. Secondly, I think his experience of playing at this surface, he knows exactly where to bowl. And my kind of thought process is if you can't play him off the back foot, it becomes very difficult because he's not going to give you anything on the front foot because his natural length is back there. You can slog sweep him, but he's very mindful. And generally in T20 cricket, and I'm sure you've noticed, spinners are a little mindful of that slog sweep. So they go a little back of length. They're all right
Yeah.
being cut and pull every now and then, but they rather get cut and pull than be driven or slog swept. So that's the same case with Varun. But because Varun's pace, and now what he's also tried to do is, if you bowl like that, it's very difficult to get overspin because it's always going to be side spin then. But what he's worked over last 2 years, and he did mention this post game, that he's trying to get some overspin as well, like the usual leg spinner. That's the reason he would get a little more bounce, which he got this game. So it's quite interesting. He's not the usual spinner, and you can't really call him a wrist spinner. He bowls leg spin, but he's more of a finger spinner who bowls leg spin, if I'm making any sense.
That's a good assessment. And it's an interesting bowler to watch, and he does look hard
Mm.
to play. What I find fascinating about somebody like that actually is I just looked up his record, and he's played 60 odd short form games. He's played one first class match in his life.
Yeah.
Amazing, and it's not surprising he's only played one first class match because his figures were 1 for 105. So it's amazing, isn't it, that he can have this kind of impact. 3 for 23
Yeah.
today, two big wickets in the middle order, and then Butler towards the end. And he just completely befuddled Harry Brook and also Liam Livingston second ball. They were sort of caught. They were caught sort of half and half, weren't they? Neither forward or back. And I guess
Yeah.
the brilliance of someone like Butler is just being able to
Mm.
pick that slightly short ball and somehow pull it for six. I mean, it's a miraculous shot, that, isn't it? I wish. I
Oh,
think we
yes.
wish we all had that shot in our armory in the past.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and if you look at Josh Butler, and I'm thinking about international T20 players who play spin well, and this is one shot they have. I mean, think of Klassen, think of
Yeah,
Josh Butler. I'm talking about overseas, as in not subcontinental players.
Brook
They
as well, actually.
play this shot. Brook as well, yeah. And I was a little disappointed with Brook. Anyways, we'll get to that. But with someone like Varun, you got to play him like Sunil Narayan. He will give you more opportunities to cut and pull rather than straight down the ground. So that's something and that's where I thought Liam Livingston, who has a lot of experience playing in India, I thought he would play the spinners a little better. But obviously, I mean, he just came and didn't spend enough time. But yeah, I mean, that's something I believe because from here on, the next 4 games, I think it's going to be predominantly spin. I think what the Indian team saw from the English batters, there's something that they want, I think, want to continue, and especially going into the next one in Chennai, which will have a little more help for the spinners as compared to some of the other venues.
Yeah. Obviously, England didn't get enough runs, 132 all out off the last ball. I mean, Butler looked excellent. You see, it's interesting, isn't it? Not enough game time, you'd say, England out of
Mm.
practice or whatever. But I mean, most of these guys have been playing, or, some of them have been playing in the Big
Yeah.
Bash. So,
Mm.
they've had the cricket. Butler hasn't had anything, and he scored
Mm.
68. So, I mean, it sort of
Yeah.
confounds theory that players play how they do, how you explain it all. But I suppose the one thing to say, from your deep experience and my lesser experience in India,
Mm.
Indian pitches are different to anywhere else. I think. I mean,
Yes.
they're a bit too paced. Some balls
Mm.
spin and some don't. The dew comes in and things skid on a bit
Mm.
more. I don't know.
Mm.
They can be quite sticky pitches, can't they?
Yes, and like you rightly said, because of the dew factor, it gets, I mean, there's another layer there, and it's a very complicated layer. Some days there'll be some dew, some days there won't be. It's more of an issue for the bowlers, obviously. But then like you said, it's quite different because it's not a straightforward pitch, and that's where these younger players got to learn. I mean, again, the last T20 World Cup is a great example in the Caribbean, where the pitch was sticking a bit. So that's where the younger guys like Jacob Bethel and all got to kind of have a more rounded game, not just watch the ball, hit the ball. You know what I'm saying? Not every pitch will suit that kind of cricket. All that, I mean, Bazball and everything is brilliant and it's very entertaining and all of that. But, you're not going to get those kind of pitches everywhere you go. So to be a better player and have a longer career, I think you have to be more rounded as a batter. You got to find ways because this pitch, I tell you what, it's generally a high scoring pitch, but I thought this pitch, even 180 would have been quite interesting. 180, 190. I mean, when you look at the scorecard, it might not suggest that, but chasing down 180 is very different from chasing down 132. Right. So had England got to say 180 somehow, and it would have been a little more difficult for India and could have been a different story then.
Hmm. Well, England didn't set much of a target for India, but my
Mm.
goodness me, they didn't half make mincemeat of it. I know I know Sanju Samson pretty well. I've spent
Yeah.
some time with him playing for the Rajasthan Royals, and I know
Mm.
how silky his timing is. And I mean, he took
Mm.
what was it, 19 off Gus Atkinson's first over
Yeah.
with just, I mean,
Yeah.
beautiful timing, and he's a really elegant player, and yet he does hit the ball so well, doesn't he? So,
Mm.
lovely start. And I think I read today that he's the first batter that's made three T20 international hundreds in 1 year. That was obviously
That's right.
last year. So
Mm.
he started off well. He got out slightly unexpectedly. But tell us about Abhishek Sharma, who just played a
Mm.
sort of secondary role initially, but then
Mm.
he cut loose 79 from
Yeah.
34 balls, eight sixes. Now, you said that, the Bethels and the Ducketts and people like that might have to have
Mm.
an in between game to
Mm.
adapt to the conditions. But I mean, there was no in between game from
Mm.
Abhishek Sharma. He just absolutely belted it. And he played some,
True.
I mean, he played one shot off Adil Rashid where it was a googly. And I know Sonny G was in the commentary box kind of waxing lyrical about
Mm.
it. He hit the googly for a left handed batter. He hit the googly on the up over extra cover, allowing for the
Yeah.
spin on the up over extra cover for six. Extraordinary shot. What a talent.
Extraordinary. I mean, listen, we first heard of Abhishek, I think he was batch of 2018, under 19. And I mean, we all kind of heard of him, as in, there's this young under 19 guy coming through. He was absolutely brilliant. He was predominantly a middle order batter. And then somehow the next couple of years, and straight away from under 19, I think, was picked up by Hyderabad in the IPL and, a lot of hype. He was retained as well. They kind of invested a lot on him. And then kind of faded away for 2, 3 years. And then I think a couple of years ago, Brian took over Hyderabad as the Hyderabad head coach, he made him open, and that kind of changed everything for Abhishek. He started opening the batting, okay, and he bowls left arm spin as well. But then since that year, a couple of years ago with Brian, I think Brian played a huge role in kind of, unshackling him. And then he started opening. Last year was was a brilliant year, his breakthrough year in IPL. Then he obviously got an opportunity. He went and scored 100. South Africa series end of last year was a brilliant one. And so you can see why he was so highly spoken of while he was coming through the ranks because of that bat flow. The bat swing is so sweet. It's so nice to see that bat swing. But what also, because the fact that he learned his trade in batting in the middle order, he was always going to be good against spin. I mean, that's one thing you are if you're a middle order batter in India, you play spin well. So spin, I don't think will ever be that kind of an issue for Abhishek Sharma. But the big question for me, especially on this surface against that bowling attack, was how he's going to face, say, the likes of Jofra or
Mm.
for that matter, even Mark Wood. And I thought he was very good. I thought he had a game plan. I'm sure you've noticed that he was deep inside the crease. He was expecting them to bowl back of length. So even though he was waiting for the short pitch ball, that did not mean that he was going to kind of throw away his wicket if something was pitched up to him. So that's what I'm saying. I mean, you would have a game plan, but that does not mean if the bowler is not bowling to your game plan, then you don't go berserk. You still have a plan B then to handle those deliveries. So I thought was really good. And yeah, and India's starting. I mean, see, this is also a new look Indian batting lineup with the
To
post the
say that
World
actually,
Cup.
because I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I was going to ask you about the state of Indian cricket generally
Mhm.
because new opening pair, obviously no Rohit Sharma, Yashasvi Jaiswal
Mhm.
not in this side at the moment anyway.
Mhm.
So it's a sort of a reinvention or a reset slightly for India. They are the champions of T20, the world
Mhm.
champions. So
Mhm.
there's no need in a way for them to change. But I suppose coming back with their tails between their legs from Australia and reading the
Mhm.
stories about the new sort of ultimatum that Virat and Rohit have got to go and
Yeah.
play Ranji Trophy cricket now, and they're playing. They're both playing Ranji Trophy cricket for the first time for almost a decade. I think the last time Virat
Mhm.
Kohli played a first class non-Test match game was 2012. Incredibly, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
rumors of chefs on tour and so on. I mean, how has this team been received by the Indian public coming back from their slight humbling in
Yeah.
Australia?
But I tell you what, I mean, this was kind of a good distraction from whatever's been happening for the last month or something. Unfortunately, there's a lot of things out there which shouldn't be out there. Uh, I don't know how much truth is behind those things, but whatever it is, it shouldn't be out there. As simple as that. And you know what? We also need to kind of dig deeper into claims like Virat not having played for the last decade or something, which is true. Factually, it is not wrong. 2012, I believe, was the last time he played first class cricket. But we also got to keep in mind Virat has been a three format player in this period, right? Quite realistically, you are then either traveling or playing 10 months a year, right? And then it becomes extremely difficult, close to being impossible for you to go play domestic cricket. Okay, and let's be very honest, and that's the same case with Rohit as well. When you're playing 10 months, either playing or traveling for 10 months, you need some time off from cricket. And because of that, I don't think they had the opportunity, to be fair, to actually go and play domestic cricket. If you're a three format player for India, it is extremely difficult. So when you say that, last time these guys played was a decade ago, which is factually true, but then there are a lot more layers attached to that.
Mm. Yeah, fair point. Fair point. And I mean, clearly the England players apply that same kind of logic as well. I mean, Joss Butler is not a three
Mhm.
format player, but I think the last time
Mm.
he played for Lancashire in a first class game would have been 4 or 5 years ago. So
Mm.
it's similar for England, I suppose. When you're not quite on it, you know, maybe
Exactly.
it calls for, what it's like with being a batter. You've kind of got to get into that rhythm and that sort of
Yeah,
tempo. And sometimes when
yeah,
you haven't got it and you're going from one test match to another
yeah.
and one international format to another, you sort of just lose that rhythm, don't you?
But that's so true. But I also have to say, while it'll be very difficult for a three format player. But if you're not a three format player, and at this point in time, I can't think of, and Bumrah is a separate case altogether. I will not even touch Bumrah. I'll let Bumrah do what he wants to. But apart from Jasprit Bumrah, in this setup, Indian setup, I don't see anyone else who's a three format player. If you're not a three format player, then I think you should be playing domestic cricket. Whether it's white ball cricket or red ball cricket, whatever you choose. If you don't think you have a future in red ball cricket, you only want to play white ball cricket, so be it. But still play then domestic white ball cricket then. With Joss Butler, for example, I was a little surprised that he's not available for the 100. I mean,
Mm.
that's the main domestic tournament. That's the
He was
feature
injured.
tournament.
He was injured last year, but I mean, he has
Yes,
played in the
yes,
past. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So things like that. I mean,
Mm.
whatever it is, but
Yeah, I mean,
that's what I'm saying. I mean,
obviously,
yeah,
I suppose you must look at it because you finished in 2009, did you? Is that right?
yeah,
Around about
that's right.
2000.
10, yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, the game has even since then
Oh, yes.
gathered so much
Mm,
pace that it's hard to, in a way, evaluate how tough it is for players who are playing all the time.
yeah,
And going back to my era, we sometimes played 28 days in 31, but
yeah.
it wasn't the same intensity then. So
Mhm.
I suppose you can't really compare
Uh,
eras. I mean, how are the Indian public about the
mm.
game at the moment? I mean, today wasn't a sellout, actually, was it? But then are people sort of saving up the money for the IPL?
Kind of, yeah. It's getting there. It's that time of the year. Then obviously, I mean, yeah, and also these bigger venues, as in I wouldn't say bigger venues, I'd say more traditional venues like Calcutta, Mumbai, and Calcutta is a big stadium. You're talking about 67, 70,000 capacity. So at times, yeah, you might not have house full, but it was close to being house full. And also they get a lot of cricket, right? Earlier on, going back to let's say pre-IPL times, in a year you would only get one international game. That's all. That's the exposure that you would have to international cricketers, international game. But now you have seven IPL home games, which is as good as international games. So there is a lot more exposure. So it's not as kind of received as it used to be pre-IPL. So that's the reason, I guess, when you look at Mumbai would be different because again, Mumbai capacity is what, 30,000, less than 30,000. Chennai, a little more. So I think these bigger venues, yeah, at times you might not have, and also, I mean, that also tells you, and you rightly mentioned about um, what the Indian public is feeling about Indian cricket, where they stand when it comes to Indian cricket, because last couple of months hasn't been that great.
Hmm. Was it carefully followed, the Australian series in India?
Absolutely yes, absolutely yes. I mean, there's no two ways. Even though the timing was
Hmm.
kind of quite
Right.
bad. Last couple of test matches would start at 5 a.m. in the morning. Was obviously even in England, I guess it'll be what midnight in England. Uh, so yeah, but it was still followed because it's one of those marquee series. India Australia is right up there along with, I guess, I don't know. I think at this point in time, as far as Test cricket is concerned, that's India, England, India, Australia are the two most watched and followed Test series. So it was, and also India having won the last two series in Australia, that kind of had the hopes pretty high as far as Indian fans were concerned. But then
Yeah.
this is how I see it, Simon, to be fair, is you won't see transition periods or long transition periods in T20 format anymore because, this generation is brought up on T20 cricket. So you will always get T20 cricketers coming in. So you won't have longish transition period. But what I think you will see going forward, long transition periods in test match cricket. It's very difficult to find the right test cricketer coming through the ranks now. Right. So right now, that's what I feel that Indian team's going through a transition period. Rohit, Virat, Shami may or may not play Test match cricket from here on. Bumrah, we don't know if which he would, but how much we don't know. So yeah, I mean, there is this
Ashwin's
transition
been
period in Test match.
Jadeja, I
Ashwin's
suppose.
already retired.
Jadeja,
Sorry, there you go.
yeah.
Jadeja as well. Jadeja, maybe I don't know, another year or two at most, maybe not. So I mean, the Indian team's going through a transition period, and I compare this period to what India went through from 2011 to 2014, where India lost 4-0 in England, 4-0 in Australia, lost to England at home. When, the likes of Sachin and Anil, Rahul, they all left, and then the new lot came in. That it took them a couple of years to settle down before, again, from 2014 onwards, they were all settled and this new lot was there. So I think this Indian team is going through a transition as well. We've got to be patient, got to give the younger guys like the Jaiswals and the Shubman Gills, Rishabh Pant, maybe another year, couple of years, maybe there'll be a new captain. He might want to lead it in a different way. So I think, uh, as far as I'm concerned, we're going through a transition period and got to be patient.
You're moving on to Chennai, is it now, for the second game?
That's right.
So, how do England compete, or can you see them competing in this short
I
format?
yeah, I definitely, yes. There's no two ways about it. There is a lot of quality, but for me, I think it's going to boil down to how the English batters play spin. How do you handle Varun, Bishnoi, and Aksar? I think that's going to be the key. Because Chennai, there will be a little more help for the spinners. Maybe Mumbai and Pune not as much. Rajkot not as much. So I think apart from Chennai, and Chennai can also be a high scoring venue, but depending on what pitch are we playing on. So there are two options. There's a red soil pitch and there's a black soil pitch. I'm not too sure which one they're going to use for the game. Depending on the surface, it could be high scoring. But generally speaking, these venues are very high scoring. Mumbai, the average scores around 190. Eden is 190 as well. Rajkot is high scoring. Pune is high scoring. So, and but for me, I think it's going to boil down to how you manage those overs. I mean, how do you play the spinners or you play around the spinners? What do you do? I think that's going to be the key.
In which case, a final point, I suppose, is that actually England might be wise to think about Duckett in the middle order because he will be
Yeah.
confronted by spin more in those sort of middle overs, and he's the guy I'd say, with his sort of
Yeah.
ingenuity and his speed of hands and his kind of clever manipulation of the ball. Maybe he's the one that they need to use more in the middle order rather than at the top.
Mm. And also the fact that he's played, even though it was Test match cricket, he's found success playing Test match cricket here in India, and how he's played the spinners. I mean, he's got those. I mean, really, really difficult shots to kind of stop runs, which is the sweep and the reverse sweep, and he plays them so well. So that's a really good idea, getting in another left-hander, and England does not have a left-hander actually. It got only two left-handers, right? In that batting order. So maybe put Duckett in that middle order, maybe at four, and then Bethel a little lower down the order, around that five, and expect him to kind of play the spinners. And see, straight away, if you have a left-hander in the middle order, then you kind of already have put the captain on the back foot when it comes to Aksar, the left-arm spinner, right? So already the captain's thinking, oh, you've got Ben Duckett in the middle order. How do I manage my left arm spin now? Right? And then if you have Josh Patel along with him, who plays spin so very well. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Harry Brook opening, and then uh,
Mm.
Duckett at four, which he's done. I mean, most of his T20 career, he has batted at four.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, interesting. Okay, well, listen, thank you for your time. Really interesting to hear. And I love your analysis. I mean, you said today, for instance, why don't the batters use the pace of the fast bowlers more? I mean, I
Yeah,
think Sanju was trying to take on the pace, and he can play that
yeah,
ramp shot just as well as anyone else.
yeah,
So I think you
yeah.
were right there. He needs to have a word with you. Anyway, listen, we'll let you go to bed because it's late and you've obviously got to get to the next game. We'll hopefully
Yeah.
speak to you again later in the series. But thank you very much for your time tonight and well played, India. It was a swashbuckling run chase and a very impressive performance.
Thank you so much for having Simon, and looking forward to catching up soon again.